once was a band that dreamed of telling stories through their music. Stories of heartbreak, stories of memories, stories of happiness. They said these stories are everywhere, written on every surface. I really couldn't find them until I started looking. I've always found something quite beautiful about the strum of a guitar or the hit of a snare. It never sounds quite the same the second time around. It's imperfect, and that allows for it to be manipulated. I always wondered why real instruments always meant more to me in music, and I think it's because of those imperfections. For however advanced technology may become, it will always lack one important aspect that helps music develop farther beyond just sound. It lacks emotion. Before I start, I do want to run with a bit of a disclaimer. I will dance around the topic of what is basically a murder-suicide in this discussion. Although it isn't anything graphic, both my words as well as some of the images I will show will imply that that is what has happened here, and if that is something that bothers you, I do recommend that you go ahead and skip ahead to the next discussion instead. Most of these songs do have heavier storylines, though this one is by far the most prominent and hard to swallow. I will put smaller disclaimers at the start of the rest of these sections in case you want to glance through and see if this is a video you even want to continue to watch. Thank you for listening, and I will do my best to handle these topics with a delicate hand. A song is really just poetry written between 5 lines instead of 1. Every song has a meaning, a reason for being created, a story that they're trying to tell. However, some songs manage to tell these stories with more than just words alone. This song starts and ends in the same place, by a beautiful lake, surrounded by nature, and the sorrowful wailing of a bow sliding against its strings. It paints a painful picture, but a familiar one. The empty schoolyards and secret meetings, overgrown weeds and unkept landscapes. It's something we've all seen and experienced. Something we can relate to. The story opens up on a meeting between a boy and a girl, hidden behind bushes and locked away in a rundown building. Something about this meeting seems delicate. Soft smiles and whispered words play over a song dripping in solitude. Enough is a song that begs for release, saying that love is far too much for the narrator to handle, and just having that person to meet them is enough. However, Enough is also a song that is filled with regret. Regret of not being there when that person needed them the most. There's a hidden urgency behind every line and shot. It's in the way every shot feels like it's holding on just a bit too long. The way it feels like there's so much unseen and yet implied. The lyrics from the beginning speak of anxiety and regret. Mentions of last nights and tomorrows. Something that may have been stopped and yet was finished anyways. The story of someone that must now live with their regrets. The meeting between the boy and the girl ends when the girl steps into a car with her parents in the second verse, having to separate from the boy until next time. The story is accompanied by the deep push of the cello with the company of a soft guitar, both carrying the weight of memories with it, along with the knowledge that the story isn't a happy ending. As the distance between the boy and the girl grows longer, the tension grows larger. Most stories have a pivotal point, a climax. The point in the story where tension is then the highest and every minor detail could play a role in the final outcome. Usually this is portrayed in the writing. The jokes start to subside, the sentences are quick and to the point, and you can feel the anxiety of the characters as if it's your own. You find yourself tense with anticipation as the thrill grows. Sometimes, though, the climax doesn't have to do these things in order to cut through to the audience. Sometimes, the idea of not seeing but knowing is scarier than actually experiencing it. In this story, the climax isn't the goodbye or the missed calls. It isn't the boy running or the girl's growing frustration. It's the fact that we see it all happen in real time, knowing there's no real way to stop it, no good way for it to end. As the boy runs, the music grows, running with him in perfect harmony, building up the emotional tension and letting it snap back all at once. And as the day turns into night, and we are finally met with the haunting lake once more, the music subsides, and with one last heartbreaking and incomplete line, "I don't want to hear you say you love me." By the time the boy makes it to the destination, the girl is long gone, and not a trace of the family is left for him to find. This story has always cut deep for me. Hoppipolla had been known for their very emotional music even before their official debut, but there was something about seeing the story behind the song come together in such a heartbreaking way, knowing that this was the type of stories they wanted to tell from the very beginning, that really made me stop and think about this song. And I'm really glad I did, because not only did I get a beautifully written story through it, but it also opened my eyes to a story like it. Whether they were as tragic as this one, or something a little more hopeful, I'll always be thankful for the song and what the band wanted to do with it, even if it is at times hard to listen to. Most stories rely heavily on indicators, as well as the assumption that the audience will be able to read between the lines. This assumption is part of what makes storytelling such a universal experience, and is half of the crafting that goes into making some of our favorite stories. The words we read are something that everyone can see, but what we get out of those words is something that only that individual can share. There are, however, stories that could be interpreted in more ways than one. The Boatman happens to be one of them. I love watching artists like Lanalogue who don't have to answer to a company head or record label. Independent artists have a lot of freedom with not only their music, but the creativity that goes behind it, and the Boatman is one of the best examples of this. The story that Lanalogue tells with their own words is the story of a sailor lost at sea, his only solace being the lover that traveled with him. However, the music video tends to tell a different side of the story, with the lyrics just barely tying the two parts together. The song opens up with a lonely piano and the vast emptiness of nature. Images of dull greens and cluttered trees fly past the camera, merging the images together as strings start to mingle in with the desolate piano. We're soon met with the image of a young man waking up on the forest floor, surrounded by trees that seem to touch the clouds and roots that seem to grab at his feet, keeping him from leaving the monstrous forest around him. Although the young man seems to run around in circles, desperate to free himself from the vine's grip, he doesn't seem panicked, and it doesn't take him long to run into a figure draped in white. Like a whisper coaxing him astray, the young man follows the white figure through the woods and finally to a clearing away from the haunting trees. Unbeknownst to the young man, the white figure leads him to another figure, this one draped in brown. The eerie scene fills the screen with a heavy feeling, though it seems none of the three have any ill intent, and it isn't long before a friendship is formed in that deserted forest. Much like the way some stories expect us to read between the lines, The Boatman is filled with details in the music alone. So much hinges on a single breath or a beat of rest. The lyrics are broad and short, over half the song being purely instrumental, so the small moments really help build up the tension on the track. The scene where the three figures meet is cut at the highest thread, allowing for just a beat of rest and a gasp of air before the music is blooming and full again and the friendship blossoms like the eerie forest around them. The wind picks up as the piano guides the song, sinking deeper and deeper with every note. The young man continues to follow, across woods and clearings, oceans and rocks. He explores with his newfound friends, and slowly they start to become more human. It doesn't take long though before the song starts to strip itself down and bare its deepest layers for the world to see. Suddenly, memories of smiling faces and fun moments are cut into with the reality of despair and heartache, the harsh feeling of losing someone you love. This time, the heaviness of the song is in the instrumental alone. The climax of the story tones it down a bit and lets the sinking feeling of loneliness fully settle into the story. the lyrics shift to something a bit darker, asking why over and over again and reiterating the fact that the narrator won't forget about those he once loved. This time, when the instrumental picks up again, it's led by strings, finally reaching the height of the song. As more memories wash over the screen, we can see how much the little time spent with these figures meant to the young man, and as his screams fill the air and the images fade to him standing alone, the song slowly dies out and we're left with one last message from the young man as he presumably continues to travel the forest alone. I'll miss you. Lanalogue is a band that I always want to brag about. Not only does their music constantly surprise me, but the creativity that goes into every release is something that always leaves me waiting for more as well. As I said before, they are a completely independent band, meaning not only are they making the music attached to these music videos, but they're also filming and directing them themselves. I can't even argue that The Boatman is their most creatively driven song yet, it just so happens to be my favorite. From the song, to the lyrics, to the music video, I love how everything matches, yet doesn't. Like there's a second meaning behind every verse. If any of you happen to like indie music as much as I do, Lanalogue is a band that I can't recommend enough. From the music, to their stories, everything about them is a 10 out of 10, and I'm always left impressed with each and every release.
I feel like I became a zombie.
Stories are fun, rather they are grounded in reality or fantasy, though not every story has to follow an actual storyline or even the simplest of plots. Sometimes, letting our everyday demons write the stories for us can make the story even more grand than the ones we can conjure up on our own. There's a saying that floats around every once in a while, especially in the rock scene, that the best music comes from the darkest places. Our lowest point is sometimes where creativity runs the highest, and many installments of the Book of Us series really illustrates that point beautifully. The series starts off with Gravity, a retro-influenced ode to youth and the usually feel-good emotions that we associate with it. Overall, the album picks up where the youth installments left off, carrying over the more rock-influenced sound from Shoot Me and introducing it to the retro sounds explored in Remember Us. The album is really just the sweet memories of youth, exploring topics such as love, friendship, nostalgia, and sometimes even the will to go back to simpler times. The album as a whole is certainly a great example of cohesion, not only in music but in concept, and in and of itself could tell a great story on its own. Yet, it's only the beginning of the series. The second installment, Entropy, comes out just a few months after the first, and while it does have some of that same retro influence on it, it doesn't always come off as the same feel-good narrative that Gravity wrote. Some of the songs seem to almost deteriorate as the album goes on, and it isn't always clear if the narrator is telling someone else's story or their own. The heavier feeling in this album doesn't completely come across in the title, Sweet Chaos, though the song itself does speak of a slow descent into madness and embracing the craziness that comes with it. The biggest difference between this album and the next is the way the blame still resides on somebody else. It would be easy enough for them to say that the song was written from another perspective, a character study about different people and how they sometimes feel when the stress gets to them. Although these songs do still seem to leave some wiggle room for guys to express themselves in or not, I do still think there are some standout songs on this album that seem to carry those intense emotions with them. Rescue Me is the first one to come to mind. It is by far Day 6's heaviest song to date, and many parts of the song read as almost angry with a certain situation or feeling. And yet, the lyrics themselves are a plea to be swooped up and saved from whatever is bothering them in their lives. The desperation comes out in full force in the chorus, and despite the heavier feel of the song, your heart can't help but clench at the implications behind the lyrics and the way the desperate plea seems to seep into their voices at times. Other songs like Ouch and Not Fine, despite being hard to twist into anything besides a song about a failing relationship, both tend to focus on the darker sides of said subjects. Ouch is a song that goes into painfully specific details about why the narrator never feels good enough about themselves and the words that make them feel that way, but it's all disguised in a trance-like beat that feels as if it came off the tail end of their last album. Not Fine finally starts the beginning of the end, and the heavy emotions that come with it. As the relationship deteriorates, the songs fall along their path, and by the time we reach the end, Like a Flowing Wind tells of the final moments as they are whisked away through the air. Entropy is very obviously an album about a relationship that was doomed from the very start. From beginning to end, we are taken on the journey of this couple and their inevitable doom. However, as the relationship starts its end, we see the narrator slowly drift away with it. It's a sad end to a once happy relationship, but it certainly isn't the end of the story. The demon really takes a dive off the deep end and shows just how low a person can truly go. Zombie starts to replace those yous with I's, and without a second party to place the blame on, the narrator comes crumbling down to a mere fraction of themselves. Just like a zombie. Zombie follows a man so over his daily life that he goes through it on autopilot. He feels hopeless, but doesn't quite feel the need to do something about it one way or another. He walks around like a zombie, empty head and empty heart, counting down the days until something in his life changes for better or for worse. Zombie is a song that most people can relate to, that dull feeling we all get every once in a while where even when knowing that things need to get done, it's hard to do more than what's expected of you. Your room's a mess, you've been digging through the same pile of dirty laundry for days now, and you can't remember the last time you fed your dog. These trivial things suddenly become difficult, and eventually it becomes hard to even present a decent version of yourself to the outside world. The zombie music video is pretty simple. It follows this man around as he drifts from place to place, people around him moving in blurs as nothing around him really matters anymore. The video ends as the place floods with the tears this man is no longer able to cry, and he lays unmoving on his bed, as always. The Demon album finally drops the retro influence as a whole and lets the songs take their own nature, not exactly following any one genre or theme. The Demon remains a very heartfelt and intense album to this day, and it is very clear that the feelings the members were feeling at this time were used to create this album and let it become what it still is. Negentropy is the final piece of this puzzle. It flows back to the love song territory, and the album overall has a quite happy feel to it. The main difference between this one and the ones before it is the switch back to the indie genre. It really feels as if they made a full circle, only to come back to the music that started them to begin with. The Book of Us series doesn't seem to be a story that was planned in any way. Rather, it feels like a timeline of events that show how a person's emotions can affect the art they make and the stories they tell. Nearly all of Day6's albums are dripping in emotion, whether that be anger, sadness, or something a little more lighthearted. But these albums remain some of my favorites for the emotional delivery in them and the way the story unknowingly unfolded in such a wonderful way. And that brings us to the end of this story. Songs and albums such as these are one of the reasons I love this genre of music so much. There's so much emotion that hinges on every beat of music, and the stories that can be told with so few words are some of the ones that I cherish the most. As someone that writes quite a bit, whether it be for this channel or for more personal reasons, I never thought these wordless stories would mean so much to me. Yet something about them just brings me so much joy when I'm able to read into them for myself. Anyways, thanks so much for watching this. I really hope you enjoyed, and as always, see you next time, travelers.